Sure is nice to have you back, lover boy.
It was hard not to be excited for Phantom Fury when it was first announced. A fully 3D follow-up to the build engine-made Ion Fury, it promised a nostalgic and highly interactive trip back to early 2000s first-person shooting, with a few nods to the cancelled version of Duke Nukem Forever. Then came the demo, which deflated the hype a bit, with a build that was visually promising but awfully buggy, with shooting that just felt flat. Retro shooter fans were left understandably nervous. Now, Phantom Fury has finally arrived, foregoing early access and screaming straight into full 1.0. Did developer Slipgate Ironworks stick the landing? In today's video, we're gonna find out. But before we get bowling, I want to say a big thank you to publisher 3D Realms for providing the review code. Alrighty, let's begin. Before we get started, I have some things to say. I want to dedicate this video to my fellow retro shooter content creators, in particular Slipgate, a smaller but insanely prolific creator from Sweden who I consider a friend. Seriously, this is one of the nicest, most passionate dudes I've met in this community, and I do not understand how he has the time to cover all that he covers. I'm not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty, but basically Slim, along with other YouTube creators I am acquainted with, contributed to the first wave of Phantom Fury reviews, and were highly critical of it, giving their honest opinions, which were unfortunately met with a negative and rude response from employees of 3D Realms. To be fair, the worst of these comments came from leaked private Discord messages where the devs were venting, and there is certainly something messed up with that. However, 3D Realms did little to stop the ensuing social media feud between them, the content creators targeted, and other creators and developers coming to their defense. A squabble I found to be stupid and cringy all around. Point blank, I do not think my fellow YouTubers deserved what was said about them. Whether or not Slim and the other reviewers were in the right or wrong, the way 3D Realms acted was unprofessional and immature. Truly, I empathize with their anger. I work in entertainment outside of this channel. I know what it's like to work on a difficult project and have it not well received. But it does not excuse their words, and it does not excuse them letting this blow up and turn into a thing. They could have been the bigger ones, but no, instead they name-called and villainized these creators for expressing their opinions. Look, part of working in the arts, regardless of what medium, is being able to take criticism, whether it be fair or not, and rise above it. You want to shut up your critics? Do it with the quality of your work, not long-winded Twitter arguments and shit talk. That sort of stuff is only going to shoot you in the foot in the long run. The retro shooter community isn't perfect, but what makes it so great is the shared passion for this style of game, and the support and respect shown to the people a part of it, whether they be content creators or developers. It's okay to disagree, get upset, and vent, but it is important to keep the discourse respectful and constructive. That's how we move forward. And that goes for everyone, the content creators, the developers, and the gamers. Stuff like this will only toxify everything, and frankly, it makes us all look bad. This embarrasses us. I was really debating whether or not I should put up this review, partly because of my disappointment in all of this, but also because, spoilers, I have a little more of a positive take on this game, and I was unsure if I really wanted to show it any support. But ultimately, what this is about is expressing my opinion, entertaining, and adding to the discourse. And being afraid to do that because of external circumstances is against that spirit. So from here will be my review as I originally wrote it. Before we get started though, be sure to check out Slipgate's channel along with a few other creators I enjoy down in the description. And be sure to shout out your favorite creators down in the comments. Alright, now let's begin.
Shelly, you're awake. Apologies for the rude awakening, but there's no time.
Phantom Fury is a sci-fi themed throwback shooter, featuring old school graphics and gameplay that harkens back to titles that are just as old or older than most of my viewers. Where its predecessor, Ion Fury, took inspiration from mid to late 90s shooters, specifically the Build Engine trilogy, Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, and Blood, Phantom Fury draws heavily from very late 90s and early 2000s FPSs, titles like Half-Life and Deus Ex, with an emphasis on being an immersive, story-driven adventure. The opening, in fact, vibes very Half-Life, with Shelly in the midst of a disaster, surviving crumbling infrastructure and fires. Unforeseen consequences. And also like Half-Life, the overall level design revolves around solving navigational puzzles with linear exploration and combat sequences to break them up. The game is set some time after the events of Ion Fury. Phantom puts us back in the boots of Shelley Bombshell Harrison, the trash-talking bomb disposal expert with a head full of pop culture and stomach made of iron. The girl's gotta eat. The game begins with Shelley awaking in a medical facility, discovering she lost her arm after an unspecified accident, replaced with a bionic one, which is rather powerful. From there, she is tasked with traveling across the US to recover something known as the Demon Core, a powerful weapon with ties to Shelley's family. Quick side note, for anyone that's interested in some historical nightmare fuel, I recommend reading up on the real-life Demon Core. Chilling stuff.
Alright, Shelley, we're certain the Demon Core is what the Heskel loyalists are after. Considering Dr. Hull lost his arm just working on it, imagine what it could do if it were weaponized.
Narrative has more of a spotlight compared to Ion Fury. While Ion certainly had a story, it was mostly driven by Shelley's one-liners and occasional trash-talking with the villain.
What are you gonna do? Send me to my room?
Shelley still spits plenty of venom in Phantom, but now we get a more fleshed-out tale, with insight into our booming brunette, some glimpses into her backstory and the demons that plague her, expressed through brief, often interactive story sequences that are effective. And the overall progress of the game feels more motivated and connected. With every new level, we know why Shelley is there and what she's trying to accomplish, making the experience feel less like a rampage through a series of mazes and more of a progressing adventure. That's not to say it's perfect, far from it. There are some predictable plot revelations that feel unearned, and some over-expository writing that comes through the radio chatter. But overall, I'm pleased to see the effort here in fleshing out both Shelley Harrison and her universe, especially since it's a universe that 3D Realms seems dedicated to expanding. Phantom Fury is a splendid looking game. Slipgate Ironworks' previous effort, Graven, is one of the best examples of the modern retro look. Nothing like a good oxymoron, huh? And Phantom Fury is another strong example from the studio. The game hits all the right nostalgic notes with its striking pixelated textures and polygonal models, taking advantage of the Unreal Engine's lighting to create stunning vistas and explosions. Although Slipgate might need to rethink how they render trees blowing in the wind. Is this thing made of jello? Much like its predecessor, levels are full of little details, which do a lot to characterize everything, and half the fun of exploring this game is just seeing all the little doodads everywhere. As promised, the game is packed full of interactivity, which may not do much for the gameplay, but it's still fun to play with. One detail I appreciated was shooting this fish tank and watching the water drain to the bullet hole. This made the Splinter Cell fan in me quite happy. Where I find myself a little critical is in the character models, in particular for the NPCs. While they're animated well, the overall look of NPCs is just a little too average and simplistic for my taste. In all fairness, they are indicative of an early 2000s shooter, but looking into the low poly pale faces of these characters took me out of the game. Performance-wise, the game was mostly fine, however, on a few occasions it did turn into a chugging slideshow. The first time it came out of nowhere and lasted for about 20 seconds before stopping, and not much was really happening on screen to cause it. The next time, it was definitely from a lot of enemies and particle effects going on. These occurrences were annoying, but uncommon enough to where it didn't hurt the overall experience. I will say the physics were pretty buggy. On multiple occasions, I found myself being flung into the air if I happened to land on or touch physical objects at a weird angle. Did you see that zombie pop in out of nowhere? This was real prominent in an early vehicle section where getting hit by an enemy made me fly into the air, at one time getting me stuck and forcing me to reload at checkpoints. The enemy AI was also buggy, which I'll touch on later. Otherwise, I had few issues with the game and was able to complete it smoothly. However, I do know of other reviewers who had a horrible technical experience with Phantom Fury, suffering multiple softlocks, audio issues, as well as more performance problems. The kind of stuff I actually experienced reviewing Slipgate's last game, Graven. So I think it's wise to say your mileage may vary with this one, and it doesn't hurt to hold out for some patches and hotfixes if you're considering a purchase.
Ooh, that ground comes up real quick.
One of the biggest criticisms of the Phantom Fury demo was its less than stellar shooting, feeling rather soft and underwhelming. Fortunately, it has been improved for the final release. For me, the shooting felt reminiscent of Half-Life 2. Many of the guns are poppy and hard-hitting, and enemies have decent, physics-driven damage reactions. Nasty blood splatter, viscera, and screen blur when you get a headshot to really feel it. Good stuff. Along with her vast arsenal that's pretty overkill, more on that later, Shelly can employ special abilities like a liquefying punch from her bionic arm, as well as an energy shield that deflects bullets. She'll also be able to upgrade her weapons and abilities throughout the journey, using collectible nanite cores that can be found through secret hunting. Upgrades run the gamut of new alternate fires for your weapons, as well as perks for Shelly. Mechanically, the game is tight and enjoyable, and the level design is strong throughout, providing fun environments to explore and puzzles to solve, at times with multiple solutions. You may get a little lost every now and then, and there are some confusing objectives to deal with, but for me, these were merely annoying speed bumps. And now we come to the bummer portion of the review. While overall I did find Phantom Fury to be a good time, I can't deny there are some glaring flaws in its design that do hold it back. Some are technical that can be addressed, some are foundational. My overarching criticism is that the difficulty is awfully lopsided. For me, the very beginning was the toughest. Right off the bat, enemies are aggressive and abundant, and the limited weapons and ammo you're given makes fending them off a struggle. Admittedly, I was also getting a hang of the game, but this is one that throws you off the deep end. However, as the game continued, I found the challenge steadily dwindled, largely due to the abundance of overpowered weaponry and doofus enemies that don't really evolve to counter them. Starting with the weapons, one thing I want to be clear about is that I really like the Phantom Fury arsenal. Most of the weapons are a blast in all senses of the word, and I was pleased to see the return of much of the Ion Fury arsenal, like the beefy Loverboy with its lock-on attack, the dual SMGs with flaming rounds, and the bowling bombs, which are still a blast to chuck out. And the new weapons, like 2 new flavors of shotgun and a host of energy weapons, had me all sorts of giddy. The problem is that there are over 20 weapons in this game, and most of them are overpowered. So much so that you can pretty much pick a handful of them to use in each combat scenario and be perfectly fine. Oh, and don't stress on the ammo, there's plenty. Keep in mind, many of these weapons can be upgraded and given alternate fires, which makes them even beefier. Truly, it's not long before Shelly feels like a walking weapon of mass destruction. And even in the final levels, you receive a pair of devastating implements that are wholly unnecessary, even though one of them will have the old-timers cheering. As much as I enjoyed this arsenal, I feel a large portion of it could have been cut and not have affected anything. But going along with that, the enemy roster never really evolves or changes a whole lot to counter this powerful arsenal. Sure, you get some tankier enemies later on that need some big booms to take down, along with ones that can turn invisible. But otherwise, a lot of this game is dismembering meatbag soldiers, zombies, and drones, and the ever-growing arsenal just makes this easier and easier to do. Whatever tension and challenge the player might be feeling at the beginning is pretty much gone at the end. To be fair, there are some fun difficulty spikes every now and then, largely due to clever level design and tough boss fights. Tough because they're cheap. But otherwise, Phantom is a little too nice to the player. It may be an amazing power fantasy, but it lacks the sense of struggle and challenge that makes this genre rewarding. Hold on, I'm not done with these enemies. The AI is one of the buggiest aspects of this game. When it behaves correctly, it's alright. Enemies will dip behind cover, chuck grenades at you, and try to flank. However, when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work, with baddies that will glitch out on cover, run straight at you for no reason, or just stand out in the open and do nothing. Now, this is one aspect of the game I think can be improved with time. It's just a shame it wasn't in time for release. The last thing I'll touch on is Phantom Fury's vehicle sections. While they are good for the pacing, giving us a break from the run and gun, in all I've found them disappointing. The first has you manning a gun-mounted vehicle not all that dissimilar from the Warthog from Halo. At first I was pretty hyped for this level. The solid vehicle handling and freedom to jump out and explore made me think I was in for something along the lines of Water Hazard or Highway 17 from Half-Life 2. Unfortunately, the map ended up being unsatisfyingly linear and full of bugs, like the wonky physics I mentioned earlier. It does end strongly with Shelley ending up in a mysterious cabin, but otherwise it just isn't the standout I think the developers hoped it would be. Later on, there's an airborne sequence which, to my surprise, is a purely on-rails sequence. Odd, given the level looks as though it was designed for free roaming, with enemy helicopters that are annoyingly obscured by your cockpit. I don't mind an on-rails sequence, but this just didn't do anything for me. The third and last sequence is better in this regard, piloting a one-woman sub with freedom to move about, but this level is pretty forgettable, with the sub being unsatisfying to control and the enemies, schools of brains, feeling inconsequential. A bummer. These levels could have been so much better. Is Phantom Fury amazing? No. There's some issues here that definitely trip it up, issues that a lot of hardened FPS players will have little patience for, and it's a shame because it's easy to see how Phantom Fury could have been a better title. All that said, personally, I still enjoyed it. I thought the mechanics were fun, the levels were engaging, and while not the best story in the world, Shelley's adventure was entertaining. Oh yeah, I was cringing at the flaws, but at the end of the day, I had fun, and that's ultimately the most important thing for me. Perhaps we file this one in the guilty pleasures cabinet. For everyone else though, this is definitely going to be a mixed shooter. We're already seeing this from its Steam ratings and the feedback from my fellow YouTubers. If you're someone looking for a fun adventure with lots of action and can overlook some flaws, then give this a shot. For those though who were hoping this would be the next great throwback shooter to exceed its predecessor, hate to say it, but this isn't it. But that's it for me today. What are your thoughts on Phantom Fury? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and smack that bell. If you want to come say hi, my Discord is linked below along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.